The Rescue of Sergeant Wolfin by Larry T. Wier. Sergeant First Class W.G. Wolfin has been listed missing in action since February 68, but I know he's not really missing. I've just kept quiet about it all these years. Then this morning I saw his wife get on television with a pathetic black and white photograph of some shriveled old Caucasian man, head shaved, shirt buttoned, mouth drawn up, eyes big and defiant. Mrs. Wolfin said she got the picture from a Vietnamese family who recently emigrated to the States, and she swore the eyes of the man in the picture belonged to her husband. My wife knows. Damn it, I'm the only one who can set her straight. As soon as I got back from Vietnam in '69, I looked up all the records and documents on Wolfin. He was one of those Green Berets who operated out of a little special forces camp named Marion. The camp was located right on the Laotian border, and Wolfin occasionally slipped into Laos with little bitty patrols. The last radio message his Alpha team leader got from him was that he'd captured an enemy artillery officer with a hot map on the Ko Rock Mountain across the river. He was trying to bring the acquisition through the wire of Marion when 8,000 or 9,000 North Vietnamese Army troopers slammed into the garrison. Wolfin disappeared. The Green Berets and the South Vietnamese allies stationed at Marion fought their asses off, but were eventually forced to evacuate and join up with the big Marine base at Khe Sanh, about 6 miles north. For the next 77 days, the NVA shelled Khe Sanh from artillery positions hidden on the Ko Rock Mountain. And though the Air Force sent flights over the mountain every day, those artillery emplacements were never pinpointed. A few months later, all the camps around Khe Sanh were abandoned. Nobody on our side went back there till I took my little 26-man reconnaissance platoon into the area on the very anniversary of the Marion Battle. The evening before we got to the old camp, I spread the platoon along a grassy ridge several kilometers to the east, and we heard 3 rifle shots come up from the river valley. Long, spooky crack rolls, spaced a minute apart like signals. We didn't see any rifle flashes, but several squad leaders got compass bearings from their positions to where they thought the sounds originated. I drew the bearings on my map, and the lines intersected about 200 meters from the center of the Marion compound. Before I could encode a message to headquarters, a dozen or so NVA soldiers passed right in front of us, and they seemed to be hurrying toward the rifle shots. We opened up with enough firepower to hose the whole outfit. I mean, the fleas on their little communist butts couldn't have gotten away. But when we searched the kill zone at dawn, it was empty. Not even any blood trails. No trails at all, in fact. I radioed everything to battalion, and the old man got on the horn and said we needed target practice. But never mind the ambush abortion. There was a chance the shots were a signal from an escaped POW. He wanted us to investigate post-haste. I should have been scared shitless, but the chance of rescuing a POW made the danger seem like a movie. I felt like I was stepping up to bat in the World Series. We tried to hurry, but it's easier to walk through a mud lake than through that crappy savanna grass, and humped under heavy rucksacks and combat gear, we moved more like pack mules than infantry. For the whole crawling, itching morning, we never saw a single sign of that phantom NVA patrol. At about noon, we pulled in sight of Marion. While the men slumped gratefully to the ground, I dragged the radio operator and my best sergeant to the top of the rise to study the burned-out compound. It lay on the other side of the valley of more savanna. The radio operator was a black-eyed Cajun called Kunas, and the sergeant was a huge black guy that some PFC had nicknamed Tunnel Bear. I'll never forget sharing binoculars with them and getting a weird buzz just looking at the legendary battle site. Burned-out bunkers stood on a big red scar bordered by yellow-green grass. Thousands of artillery, mortars, rockets, and bombs had cauterized the dirt, and I doubted anything would ever grow there again. I checked my map for the suspected origin of the rifle shots and scanned down the ridge some 200 meters until my binoculars registered on a small hillock of lush grass. In the dull savanna, that little knoll stood out like a strange green light. Tunnel Bear whispered, "Weird shit, Lieutenant." I sent security squads a couple of 100 meters to the right and left of the hillock. Then, leaving the platoon sergeant with the team to hold our present position, which would serve as a rendezvous point, I moved down to the knoll with a little 5-man search party. When we climbed the hillock, the scratchy grass turned soft as old cloth, and an ancient odor of death rose up from the spongy earth and hit me in the face like a flat hand. The point man turned toward me and pinched his nose, but I just nodded and motioned him into the putrid vapor. Then a sharp crackling sounded, and we all dropped down in anticipation of a booby trap. Somebody snapped his fingers, and I looked over to see Tunnel Bear pointing down at the thing he had stepped on. Reaching into the grass, he drew out a long brown bone. I signaled for the patrol to continue, but we stopped a minute later when the point man found a human skull. I knew it was NVA by the rusted Chinese-made AK-47 rifle beside it. We proceeded only 5 or 10 minutes before finding the remains of 4 more bodies, or at least we found 4 more skulls. The rest of the bones were scattered around where animals and birds had left them. Rusted grenades, old magazines of AK-47 ammunition, and rotted scraps of khaki uniforms were all over the place. We spread out on a line to comb the grass while 2 men collected all the skulls in a little clearing for an accurate count. They laid them out in neat rows and put cigarettes between the bony jaws. One of the men wrote a sign on the cardboard from a C-ration box. "Caution, the Surgeon General has declared cigarette smoking hazardous to our health." I snapped pictures with my little Instamatic while Coon-ass shook his head and warned against agitating the spirits. He crossed himself each time we found another skull. At the top of the rise, the ground dropped into a conical pit like a miniature volcano. Blackened clods and plastic skins of ruptured sandbags were all churned together, meaning there'd been a big underground explosion. One of the men went down into the pit and then stopped and started swatting the air and slapping at his face and his arms, hollering "Bees!" and he bolted out of the cone. A swarm of wasps blasted up from the ground like the discharge of a landmine, and the air filled up with furious insects. I issued the only possible command, "Jesus, let's get out of here!" The wasps chased us off the knoll, then turned away as soon as we passed through the soft grass. I was lucky. Everyone in the patrol but me got stung. I called the platoon sergeant who'd set up a long antenna at the rendezvous point and asked him to relay to headquarters a report about the skeletons, which now totaled 15. He called back with the message that the operation officer had gotten really excited and had given the directive to continue searching. That's when it dawned on me that our unit was getting body count credit, as if we'd killed those long-dead soldiers. I thought, what the hell, these are the easiest kills I ever got. We circled the ridge, figuring the wasps would have time to settle down while we moved. On the other side, we found an indentation cut into the steep bank where a pile of sandbags and dirt halfway covered a door of perforated steel planking and wood. It was the entrance to a bunker dug into the ridge. We could see by the color of the door that it had once been completely covered up, but all the monsoons had washed half the dirt and shit away. We pulled out our entrenching tools and started clearing the entrance. Coon-ass brought his pasty face up close to mine, and he said, "We oughtn't to go in there, sir." He looked like he was about to cry, and his huge black eyes bulged. Well, I tried to act cool and told him, "Don't sweat it, Coon-ass. I won't make you go in there." But still, his eyes had gotten to me. In short time, we cleared the obstruction. The door didn't have a handle, but the holes in the perforated steel allowed for a grip. I tugged hard, but it stuck, so 2 men latched on and we heaved back. Just as the door edged open, the sky turned black, and a creepy wind kind of whistled through our group. We stopped and looked at the sky and at each other. Something perfectly round and big as an eyeball fell into our midst. We backed off as if the object were a grenade. Then more of the objects fell, and within seconds a load of hail banged on our helmets like dumping rocks. For the second time that day I led a retreat, this time to the west of the ridge. When we reached the high savanna grass, we covered ourselves with ponchos and peered out at the landscape, which had turned as white as a Nebraska winter. The storm lasted less than 5 minutes, during which Coon-ass constantly whined about violating that death sight. The rest of the men had also gotten spooked. I called the platoon sergeant with a message to headquarters about the bunker and a hailstorm. The platoon sergeant's radio operator says, "What hailstorm? Over?" He must have gone nuts. The rendezvous point was only 300 meters away. A storm that size should have hit them, too. The platoon sergeant got on the radio and said they hadn't seen or heard shit about no hailstorm. We were the crazy ones. At that moment, the skies cleared, the sun came out and turned the hail into thick, silent steam. Just then, kapow! We damn near jumped out of our web gear. A shot had plainly come from the bunker. Coon-ass crossed himself and whimpered, "Jesus Mary!" When the echo stopped rolling down the river, a heavy silence settled on the freshly cleared door, which looked like a missing tooth on the face of the ridge. To this day, I see that circle of staring faces. I tried to say something funny. I always did that when I got real excited. But when nobody laughed, I just motioned the patrol back up the slope. Security teams spread to the top and the sides of the bunker while Tunnel Bear and I pulled the door open. Tunnel Bear said, "Sir, I can't go in there. I got a bad feeling about this." He dropped his eyes and handed me the .45 automatic and flashlight head strap he used for bunker searches. He said, "You can write me up for this, sir, but I can't do it." His big black face glowed with sweat. I said, "Well, I'll check this one out personally, Tunnel Bear. Watch this door." Handing him my helmet, I stuffed wads of toilet paper into my ears to protect them against the .45's concussion. Then I strapped the flashlight to the side of my head and snapped it on. With the .45 pointed out like a probe, I entered the bunker, one hesitating step at a time. A slant of light from the door exposed crates of rifle and machine gun ammunition stacked in rows all the way to the end of the room. An opening in the left wall near the end led into an adjoining cell, standard procedure for ammunition bunkers built with several sandbagged chambers to keep the ordnance separated by lot. The second room was totally black, aside from the meager beam from my headlight and one or two thin rays leaking through cracks in the sandbags. I had a hell of a time repressing the fear that kept me glancing over my shoulder. Pulling the light from my head strap, I crouched down under my upraised hand in case of a shot and panned the area. Irregular patterns drew my attention, and moving closer I could see that the wall on the other side of the room and a third cell beyond it were completely caved in. I called out, "Anybody in here?" I damn near peed when my light beam fell on two skeletons lying against the bank, the dirt, and the sandbags. A whine leaked out of my lungs as the sweet rot smell hit me, and I had to force myself into that stench. A huge set of tiger-striped fatigues draped loosely over what had once been a very large man. Sergeant First Class chevrons showed below the broad arrowhead patch of the Special Forces. The black-on-olive name tag on the shirt front read, Wolfin. A small canvas satchel lay under a bony hand, and when I drew the satchel out, a thickly folded topographic map slid to the ground. Pointing the light down on it, I could see Vietnamese scribbling and military symbols for artillery plainly penciled on a mass of contour lines labeled Co Rock. I remembered the stories about the North Vietnamese artillery hidden on the mountain across the river. I turned the light beam on the other skeleton and recognized the khaki uniform of North Vietnam. Leaning in, I could barely make out undecipherable letters and numbers stenciled on the breast pocket flap. All this time, I'm thinking about that last rifle shot, and every 30 seconds I'd snap the light around the room trying to surprise whoever had to be in there with me. But the only sounds came from me, gasping for air in that stink. I decided it was about time to take the map and uniforms outside for a better look. The idea of touching any of that death gave me the squirming pissers, but I sucked in a mouthful of courage and tugged at the tiger fatigues. They disintegrated in rot, so I settled on taking Wolfin's name tag. And this is where my story really goes crazy. I hardly believe this stuff myself. But damn it, I'm telling it exactly the way I remember it. When my fingers closed on Wolfin's name, a current like low-level electricity flowed from the corpse into me. I tried like hell to pull away, but couldn't. The dead guy was trying to communicate with me. I'm not bullshitting. For maybe 10 seconds, I could see Wolfin forcing a Vietnamese officer into the bunker, muzzle flashes and tracers and artillery and bombs everywhere, plain as a sideshow, an explosion directly on the door, and Wolfin and the Vietnamese guy going unconscious for about a day, during which all Americans and NVA left the area, not knowing about Wolfin and his captive trapped inside. Then the Vietnamese officer waking up and taking Wolfin's M16 rifle and firing signals. Scared the holy snot out of me. The only way I could get loose was to tear Wolfin's name tag free. When I stuffed the strip of cloth into the side pocket of my fatigue shirt, the scenes vanished. I remember actually hearing myself panting. I was that scared. I got this premonition that something really bad was about to happen and wanted to run my ass out of there. But I knew the inscribed shirt pocket on the Vietnamese had intelligence value, so I snatched at it. But that freaky energy came back and lit up my head with more of those scenes. NVA soldiers crawling all over the bunker, yelling down at their officer inside. And I knew they were asking him to commit suicide to prevent the Americans from getting this information about the coal rock, and him cursing back at them and crawling into the third room, the one that had caved in, and him lighting a fuse on a whole case of C4 explosive. Then I see Wolfin crawling in to try to stop him. With super strength, I yanked my hand away. That's when I saw the M16 rifle on the other side of the Vietnamese. I remembered those rifle shots and picked the M16 up. But the encrustation all over it told me the weapon couldn't have been fired in a long time. I swear to God, the Vietnamese skull turned toward me and grinned. A dreadful logic seemed to race up my legs like snakes from the ground. Those 3 rifle signals of the night before, the phantom patrol, that last shot, the pit, the skeletons outside. The map and M16 clattered to the dirt as I scurried like a rat for the exit. Breaking into the twilight, I yelled, "Tunnel Bear, assemble the patrol. Kunas, call the other squads. Tell them to return to the rendezvous point now." For the 3rd time that day, we hauled ass. Leading the way around the bunker toward the rendezvous point, I stopped and waved the men past me. "Run, damn it, come on!" They caught my urgency and scrambled through the high, soft grass. We had no sooner entered the savannah when a horrendous explosion screamed from the old bunker, hurtling us forward into the abrasive growth. I had to cover my neck against the falling clouds, and I lay there listening to the arguments ricocheting inside my skull. I almost convinced myself that Wolfin and all the rest were wild coincidences and hallucinations, but when I crawled back for a look, my breath stopped in my throat like a plug of mud. A huge man appeared on top of the bunker, silhouetted against the glowing pit. In the darkness, I actually felt his eyes on mine, and I stood transfixed as he stuck his hand out at me. I knew what he wanted. Pulling his name tag from my pocket, I flung it toward him. My men came rustling through the grass, but I felt an overwhelming need to keep the scene to myself. Tearing my eyes from Sergeant Wolfin, I ran to intercept them. I guess I feared they would either see Wolfin and verify his apparition, or fail to see him, and, well, I wasn't prepared to deal with that. Big as Tunnel Bear was, I nearly ran him over in the dark. The quaking in my voice didn't embarrass me a bit when I told him to get the patrol moving fast. Then I said to Kunas, "Call battalion. Tell them we found an old ammo bunker and I accidentally set off an explosion. No casualties." I guess we were in too big a hurry. I never made mistakes in Vietnam unless I got in a hurry. But before we got 100 meters from the bunker, the point man stepped on an unexploded bomb. Damn glad I didn't see it. The rest of us, Coon-ass, Tunnel Bear, and I, got shrapnel, broken bones, and bad concussions that kept us unconscious in the hospital for 2 whole days. Then, Tunnel Bear and Coon-ass died, not from the concussion or the shrapnel, but from delayed reactions to those weird wasp stings. I don't believe in the supernatural or ghosts. Hell, I don't even have a religion, so none of that stuff could have happened. Mrs. Wolfin is certain to eventually learn that the guy in that old picture of hers is not her husband. So, do I really need to talk to her? Larry T. Wier, winner in the action category of the Summer 1992 contest in short story writing, has a long association with the Army. He has been the Director of Health-Related Fitness at the NASA Johnson Space Center since 1983, accumulating non-fiction credits in his particular field of interest. He was also winner in the humor category in the aforementioned contest.